Seems like we're going horizontal today. Okay then. Let's get into it. Okay. We are locked to the horizontal stream, it seems. Move that over here. Okay. We're in. MMA world is not that crazy in regards to the fights at the moment, but definitely pretty crazy with everything else that's going on. So Ilya, good place to start. That's probably the biggest fight in MMA right now, or at least UFC. That's the biggest fight you can make. Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria. When you look at that, stylistically, it's an interesting one because you have Max Holloway, who is the self-proclaimed best boxer in the UFC, and then you've got Ilia Topuria, who I'm sure would also say the same about himself, coming off a phenomenal win of the Volkanovski. Of course, we know Max has 3 losses to Volk, but hasn't lost to anyone else at featherweight for over a decade. So the fight on paper is a fascinating one. It really is a fascinating one. The thing that a lot of people are overlooking, I believe, is Max's strategy and game planning for this fight. I think when you look at Max on a surface level and you just know he likes getting into fights, he takes a lot of shots. But when you actually look at his career more recently, against Arnold Allen is a good example. Justin Gaethje's even a good example. Taking a lot less damage and also fighting quite differently. Now, I know that sounds silly because he went out there, pointed at the ground, got in a fest in the last 10 seconds and got his knockout, but that wasn't indicative of the whole fight. I am swaying towards Max as things stand, but Ilia Topuria is not someone that you can write off at any point of the conversation. It's going to be a difficult one. That really is going to be a difficult one. The one thing I will say is Ilia Topuria is not yet lost. So there isn't much film study to do around how people beat him. In fact, there isn't. But he has been dropped twice, I believe, in his career. And it was both off the left high kick. So to have success in this fight, I do believe Max is going to need to keep it at more of a kickboxing range. Easier said than done. But he may have success as well with high kick. He is particularly lengthy for the division as well. And he'll definitely, or his team will definitely go back and look at different fights. That's another good point. He does usually go for that boxing high guard. So things up the middle are likely going to favour that. I can see Max, that is, using a lot of longer range weapons like the teep, the stab kick to the middle. So not only can he do it from distance, but he's probably going to have a part there just because of the guard that Ilia goes with. And also, he does have quite a low centre of gravity. So that is going to open up things like uppercuts. It will open up knees that we see Max Holloway likes to step in with and cover distance. Now, he's going to have to pick his times with that because you have to be minding your P's and Q's when it comes to Ilia Topuria. Because if you put one foot wrong, that could be it. And that's what he brings to the table. I do believe Max has power. I've been saying that for a long time. He can knock people out. I don't think he has the one, well, he doesn't have the one punch knockout power that Ilia has. So the margins of error are much smaller on Max's side. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to get knocked out and his chin's going to get cracked because he's had so many fights. The only thing that can see mostly with his chin in this fight is the fact that he's coming back down lightweight. Now, he didn't put on a crazy amount of size, but he definitely did put on some size and some muscle. So he's going to go back to featherweight, and that cut is likely just going to be harder. Bearing in mind his age, bearing in mind the fact that he's probably put on a little bit more muscle, is going to be very difficult. So it's not that Max's chin, I think, is gone, just more so how hard is that weight cut. Do I think Payton Talbot has the skill to get up there in the rankings? For sure. Now, it just so happens he's in the hardest division in all of mixed martial arts, the bantamweight division. However, he definitely has the skills. The skill that he has, which I believe is his biggest attribute, is his composure. That's truly one of the biggest skills. You look at people like Sean O'Malley. You look at people like Ilia Topuria is a good example. Of course, these people have the elite skill sets. But it's more so the case that when they go in there under the bright lights, under the attention, with the build-up, perform. They perform when it matters. And Payton Talbot had a lot of attention on his shoulders. And he had a big platform when he went out there in his last fight. And he looked incredible. Every time he's looked incredible. It's his composure and it's how relaxed he is just in his fighting style. The more I look at the Alex Pereira Khalil Roundtree fight, I definitely think it's a harder matchup for Alex than Magomed Ankalaev. I truly do believe that. I'm not saying that majority of the time Khalil Roundtree goes out there and starches Alex. I don't think that's true. But I definitely think he's a harder matchup. I really do. If you go back and watch the Ankalaev Jan Blachowicz fight, that will show you just how many problems Magomed had with the calf kick-in game of Jan Blachowicz. Jan Blachowicz is a tremendous kicker. Alex is a lot more subtle with it. You won't be able to get the reads from him, and it only takes one or two before you're compromised. And we saw how compromised he got in that fight with Jan, and then he had to switch stances. And if you're having to switch stances with Alex, and you're going into your worst stance, where typically your defense is not as good, that's going to be very problematic. A lot of people bring up this grappling narrative of Ankalaev, but it's very rare that he really leans into that grappling. He's never had a submission professionally or in his amateur career. He does have good ground and pound, but with ground and pound comes space. And if you get space, Alex does a phenomenal job of just getting back to his feet. So I really don't think the grappling is as big of a point as people are making it out to be perfectly honest. I really don't. And the fact that I've seen Alex with Jan Blachowicz on his back for an entire round almost gives me confidence to say that. So say Khalil Roundtree could be a harder matchup for him. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. Khalil Roundtree's dangerous on the feet. Very dangerous. And what's more dangerous than that is he's now confident. Extremely confident. Put together quite a few good wins. Few stoppages. Now the boy's confident. What's happening, Ollie? Who's next for Izzy? I believe the next fight for Israel should be Kaio. I think that's the fight they should make next. I think it's the fight that makes sense. They want to build him as much as they can because he's come from Contender Series. He puts on exciting fights. He's now in the top 5. He comes from an exciting gym. There's a lot of narratives that they can make with him. And the top 5 in middleweight is a little bit log-jammed at the moment. So I think Kaio versus Israel is a good fight. The Cyril Gane conversation is an interesting one at the moment because he's got that fight coming up with Volkov. Of course, it's the rematch, but Gane's not been active. He's not been active, and Volkov has not only been active, but he's been putting together some very good wins, putting together some good momentum, and now he's even getting more comfortable in himself, just in regards to his character online. It's sort of coming together for Volkov. It's quite an interesting case study, actually, in the heavyweight division. I think there's a lot of rumours going around Alex Pereira and Magomed Ankalaev. Don't think either man were ducking either one, to be honest. I think something a lot of people don't consider when they think of these fights is the logistics behind it. Usually they want people for certain dates. Fighters sometimes turn around and say, I want the fight, not on this date. And then the UFC say, okay, we're not doing it. They turn around and he doesn't want to fight this date. The person comes out and says, they said no to the fight. So it's always a bit like this. And the UFC play both sides because it makes bigger narratives out and they're promoting fights at the end of the day. If Makhachev wasn't solely from Dagestan, everyone would see my point. I think so. I think so. I'm not saying he's not a good fighter, and I'm not saying that he can't win. I'm not saying either of those things. I'm just saying there is this narrative around Magomed Ankalaev that I think that when you actually watch the footage, actually watch what he does, it would lean towards it being a favourable matchup for Alex. I don't know what Ankalaev brings to the table that would be very problematic. Is it submissions? No. Is it lights out wrestling? Not really. Is it knockout power? He does have that. But is he extremely educated on the feet? Not to the level of Alex. So I don't know. How tall am I? 6'2". Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. I'm glad you enjoy the content, my friend. I've been upping output recently. Just strategizing everything at the moment. Just upping the output. Should Arman fight Oliveira rematch for the interim? So I just made a video on this because they're trying to get Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan booked for December. Now, if that doesn't happen, it's not confirmed, but Arman believes that they could potentially make an interim. Not a fan of that. If they were to make an interim, you have a couple of front runners. You have Charles Oliveira, first and foremost. Then you have Dan Hooker. And then you have even a Max Holloway, potentially, which is kind of crazy. If we're talking in the springtime for the interim, you could even float Max in conversations if he were to win against Ilya. That opens up a big new conversation. What are the drawings behind me? These are the comics, my casuals comics, and the poster of the first fight night that I went to. I've made a video of these matchmakings, actually. It's funny you say that. I literally have one in my drafts as we speak. What do I think about Yuri moving down to middleweight potentially? Thank you, mate. Appreciate it. Yeah, so try and do one on different stories. So this was on when Leon won the title. This was when I went out to Abu Dhabi. So this was the Charles Islam fight, which obviously never ended up happening. The most recent one is the Bisping one as well, when I went to Manchester. However, the Yuri Prochazka scenario, I've been saying for a long time I think he should go down to middleweight. He's not a particularly big light heavyweight at all. At all. And I think there's some matchups there for him. I do think he is a name big enough that they could just chuck him into the title. I don't think they're going to do that. They could. I don't think they will. So where does that leave Yuri? Now, he's saying that he doesn't want to fight Israel. Not a fan of that because I want to see that fight. I want to see that fight. Yuri Prochazka versus Israel Adesanya is what I would like to see. But they're saying the same management, so they won't make it. Not a fan of that at all. I want to see that, selfishly. But then that opens up a few avenues. I think Yuri Prochazka versus Kaya Baralo is not a bad shout. I think Yuri Prochazka versus a Marvin Vettori is not a bad shout. You need to have him in there with one of these big names in the divisions. Say, a Yuri Prochazka Paulo Costa. Who's not watching that fight? Yuri Prochazka Paulo Costa is a good one. I really like that, actually. Conor is that guy who does just keep losing, but they still throw him a bone. And I get it. He is a big name. He does a good job on social media. And he does bring it in these fights. I do think if he wants to go on to the title, he needs to mix it up. I don't think he's going to, but I think he needs to mix it up. Where can you buy the posters? I'm actually not too sure. You can buy it at the events, but I'm not too sure where you can online. What's next for Kyle? I think Israel. I think Israel's the fight to make for him. Stylistically, I think it makes sense. Name value makes sense. Passing off the torch moment, potentially. But then again, as well, on the flip side, if Israel goes out and does the UFC a favour as well, because one of the biggest stars has a good win off of good momentum. Who is better, Islam or Khabib? Define better, but if you skill sets, I think Khabib had less paths to victory, but was more aggressive in that approach. But when you look at Islam, he can fight anyone, anywhere. He can box Dustin Poirier. He can out-grapple the grapplers. He can out-sack Volkanovski. So that is a terrifying prospect. Now, I think if you were fighting one of them, you'd probably rather fight Islam. Just because if he does fight you in these different disciplines, there's going to be marginally more areas for you to win. Whereas if you knew he was just going to take you down and submit you or beat you up. But if it's standing with Islam, even though he's likely to be better than you, there is a chance that you can clip him. There is a chance that he engages in the pocket. There is a chance. Khabib, there were very few chances. So I think as a fighter, I think he's the guy. Islam is the guy. What different types of content is there to post in regards to TikTok MMA? What do you enjoy? What do you enjoy posting? It's a simple question. What do you enjoy watching? What do you take interest in the world? Is it financially? Do you look at financial side of MMA? Do you have a look at the market of MMA? Do you have a look at the behind the scenes, the interviews, the breakdowns, the memes? There's a million different areas, not just in MMA, but in anything. So you just apply what you enjoy or what you like or what you'd like to like backwards. Guru impact of the game been massive recently because a big figure. He is a big figure in the sport for sure. I don't think it's recent. I think it's just been a slow build for his brand. And so I think we're now sort of seeing the surface level of how much that has spread across. He's been putting in the work for many years. You're welcome. You're welcome. It's true. You always have to reverse engineer it, right? You always have to reverse engineer what you like watching or what you'd like to make. And then if you don't know the answers to that, you then have to learn how to create attention at the very least. Thank you for the roses. I appreciate the gift. And ramen noodle. Ramen noodle. That's my favorite type of food. So thank you for roses. I appreciate it. How good do I think Ilya can be? Well, the fascinating thing about Ilya is we've barely even seen him use his ground game yet. He's just knocking people out. So the fact that we haven't really seen his offensive grappling too much, we saw it a little bit against Brad Mitchell, but not too much, is very interesting. Where would I put Izzy versus Kyle on a pay-per-view? Co-main. Have to put that co-main. That's too big of a fight not to. In truth, I think that fight should be the headliner for a big fight night. Bearing in mind that the UFC are not doing any Apex cards from November till the sort of spring, summertime, they're going to be on the road a lot. So I think Israel versus Kyle would be perfect for a big fight night main event on a stacked out card somewhere quite. That's what I think. If they go back to Brazil, I think that would be perfect, to be honest. I think that would be really good the more I think about that. Has to be 5 rounds though, I do agree. Have to. Need more fight nights in Europe, most certainly. When you have a look at what different organisations like ACA, Octagon, Cage Warriors always, PFL even to a certain extent, I preface that, the Europe crowd is absolutely buzzing. I think one of the biggest fights you can make in Eastern Europe would be a Jiří Procházka versus Jan Blachowicz fight. You look at what Octagon's doing, 58,000 people in Frankfurt, that's insane. Insane. In fact, I do even want to go out there and cover that event because it's just crazy. 58,000 in Germany. It's wild. My favourite welterweight prospect. I've been saying Michael Morales for a very long time. So the fact that he came out against the ultimate gatekeeper, who if you are not on and if you are not elite, you will lose to, he came out with spinning elbow and a finish. I'm glad he has now gone onto everyone's radar. And it's not the fact that he's just undefeated. And it's not just his skill set. Again, it's the composure. And it's the ability to turn up and perform that Michael Morales has, which is why I think he's so exciting. And if he continues to just keep going and finishing people, not going to be long till he's thrown around in that title conversation. It won't be long. Keep it casual. Yes, sir. Surely Khabib sheer dominance should warrant a #1 GOAT spot. I don't believe so. And let me explain to you why. I'll tell you why it doesn't deserve it. Now, it's completely subjective. So if you do believe that, you believe that. And I'm a big Khabib fan. But the reason why I personally could never say that is because the longer I'm around, the more time I spend in gyms, the more fight weeks I go to, more times I watch people's career play out, I realize how many nuances there are to this game. And I realize how difficult it is to turn up and perform, even on just the regional circuit. To peak and perform on one given 15-minute slot, 25-minute slot on one particular day is incredibly difficult. So to do that against the very best, to do that when you have different things going on in your life, different injuries, bad camps around the world, different weight cuts, all of these different elements is phenomenally impressive. So I put emphasis on title defenses because not only are you getting there, showing up, turning up multiple times, but you're doing it against the very best, whose sole mission and objective in their life is to beat you. Now, when you're coming up, different story. When you're the one being hunted and everyone's life mission below you is to beat you, there's more tape study, there's more rounds to watch, there's more prints to beat you. And people are studying you day in, day out to dethrone you. That's why I emphasize title defenses. So someone like a Demetrius Johnson, John Jones in a certain respect, Anderson, that's where I put the emphasis on there. Do I think Ankalaev beats Alex? No, I don't, to be honest. Do I think he can? Of course. Do I think he would more times than not? No, I don't. I think good matchup for Alex Pereira, to be honest. I think it's actually a good matchup. The fact that this narrative around Alex is ducking Ankalaev, I think is silly. I think that's just because people are looking at his record and looking at the flag of which he represents. I think if you look at their skill sets, I think it's a very favourable matchup for Alex. And I think if he's going to knock either one of those out, I think there's a higher chance that he would do it with Ankalaev, to be perfectly honest with you. I really believe that. I think he can knock either man out. I think Kyle beats Strickland. Yeah, I think there's a lot of difficult fights for either one of those. What are the negatives of weight cuts? What are so bad about them? Good question. So, firstly, the weight cut itself, the process of cutting a lot of weight, very bad for your internal organs. Not only bad for your internal organs, but also bad for your recovery around your internal organs. Not only long term, but short term as well. So it dehydrates your brain. So when you're getting hit, punched, kicked, there's less water essentially around your brain, which is already an issue. Number two, there's actually so many. Number two, typically with bigger weight cuts, you're having more drastic caps in regards to reducing your caloric intake. When you do that, you have less energy, you have less mental clarity, you have less attention, less focus. So it really impacts your camp. You've heard a lot of people say before, it becomes fat camp rather than a training camp. And it does. I've seen it firsthand. It becomes about making weight. So you're thinking about running, you're thinking about the fact that you're hungry, you're thinking about when will this session end because I am knackered and tired. I have to run and get on the treadmill and I'm not looking forward to this. Then I have to jump in the sauna suit. And your whole mindset throughout the 6 to 8 weeks is around making the weight rather than improving your skill set. Rather than going into being fueled on a good amount of carbs, a good amount of energy, you're going in there wanting to get better, wanting to try new things, be more creative, ask more questions. So it's not always just the weight cut itself, it's more so what comes before. There's a lot that goes into it. What weight is flour? It's 125 pounds. What would I like to see next? Do I like boxing? I do like boxing. I like more so now they're making bigger fights. There's a lot of things that I would change about boxing. But what's that in kg? I think it's 56 kilos, something like that. I think it's 56 kilos. Right, last couple of questions and then I am going. What's happening, Cage Chat Combos? Sugar's whole system of striking is better than Izzy's. I don't disagree. I think what Sean O'Malley then say Israel has the ability to strike moving backwards and laterally more consistently. Now, Izzy can do both of those things. We've obviously seen that before, but I think Sean does it to a higher level out of both stances more fluidly. If you have a look at his movement as he's backing up or circling out defensively, it's a lot sharper. His footwork's a lot sharper. If you go back and watch the DDP fight, he trips his feet quite a few times, crosses his legs, backs up in a straight line. Not great. Now, that does lead me to question what was the injury if he wasn't throwing low kicks. So I would imagine it's a lower body injury. Now, would that affect his footwork moving backwards? It would likely do that. So that's the fun that I'm sort of linking those together. I don't think Izzy is an overrated striker. I think it's easy when someone's beaten or someone lays the blueprint of how to beat someone to then go back and say, nah, they were never that good. No, don't think that's the case. Just take someone very elite to go in there and beat him. And you look at the people he's lost to. Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis, whilst they're not the most orthodox and attractive strikers to watch, they're incredibly good. I am in the corner, my friend. This is the corner. This most certainly is the corner. Right. Last question. That one's a loaded one. Whenever someone asks you your favourite this or the best this is always difficult. I've broke down Ilya and Max quite a few times, so probably I'm not going to go through that one. I'm going to leave with one more. One more. Okay, there we go. You're more than welcome. I hope that you had a good evening at the Cage Warriors event. It's always pretty fun there. If the UFC is ever in the UK and people can't get tickets or they're too expensive, I always say to people, Cage Warriors, if on, which it usually is around those weekends, is always a good event to go to. 30, 40 pounds, you'll get a night of very good matchups. The matchmaking on Cage Warriors is always fantastic. The caliber of fighting is always brilliant. You look at the people who have come out of there and you get really good seats. Okay, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the engagement. If you'd like to become a subscription member, then you can find that on my site. I'll be doing sub-only subscription only live streams for those people. I'll also be doing behind the scenes content for them, and I'll also be making profile reviews, and so I'd be giving away content information because I get asked that a lot. So if you would like any of that, or giveaways I've got on there, whether it's the clothing, the hats, the jerseys, the comics, all on the subscriptions. So if you want any of that, you know where to find it on the profile. Again, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for your time. And as always, keep it casual.